Let's talk about the upcoming Samsung Galaxy S9. So I recently did a Leaks and Rumors episode on the 2018 iPhones. So everything that we currently know and everything that we expect to see in 2018 when it comes to the iPhone. But the 2018 iPhones will only come out in September, so yeah, it's quite a long wait. But the Galaxy S9 is just around the corner, with a possible release date of early spring 2018. So here's everything that you need to know when it comes to the upcoming Samsung Galaxy S9. So everything from the design, the display, camera, specs, all the new features, storage options, battery, release date, price, and so much more. Oh, and if you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe and enable notifications for more Leaks and Rumors episodes like this one. But for now, grab some snacks, because this is going to be one very long but very interesting and exciting video. So yeah, enjoy. Okay, so the presumed logo for the Samsung Galaxy S9 and the S9 Plus has been leaked. So these two images were actually posted by Benjamin Gaskin, and yes, they do look like something Samsung would indeed design. But I mean, at this point, we're all expecting the next Galaxy phones to be called the S9 and the S9 Plus. So there's nothing really surprising about that, but there we go, logos, presumed logos for the S9 and the S9 Plus. Okay, now starting off with the design, the Samsung Galaxy S8 had the biggest design change for a Galaxy S phone. I mean, just take a look at how awesome this thing looks. We have almost zero bezels, and all we get is this massive 5.8 or 6.2 inches display, depending on which model you choose. And I mean, holding this thing and using the S8 Plus feels amazing. You feel surrounded and completely immersed by this display. Reason why? Samsung is calling this an infinity display, by the way. But that was the S8, so what about the S9? Well, when it comes to the S9's design, we did have quite a few reports, one coming from BGR, that the S9 will actually feature a design similar to the iPhone X. So no bezels on the bottom or even the top, apart from a notch that would actually house the front-facing camera and all the sensors. And by the way, speaking of this, Samsung has even filed for a patent in May 2016 showing this design. But I mean, patents are just patents, and most of the times they don't make it into the final product. So I think this is a really good way of envisioning how the S9 might look like with a display notch like that, but it's not 100% confirmed. This is just a patent that Samsung filed in 2016, filed. And even though I would love to see this on the S9, especially on a 6.2 inches display, I honestly don't see this happening. I mean, Samsung, at least not with the S9, because Samsung has spent a lot of money when it comes to developing the S8's design. And they might do some small design tweaks, so same as they've done from the S6 to the S7, but I don't expect to see any significant design changes. So the top and the bottom bezels, they might be getting a bit smaller, but even that's pretty questionable. I mean, the back would still be made out of glass like we have right now, and the frame would still be polished aluminum. So no major changes when it comes to the design. Okay, now what about the actual display? Well, most reports are pointing towards the exact same display size as on the S8, so 5.8 inches on the S9 and 6.2 inches on the S9 Plus. And this is most likely going to be the case, especially since, Samsung won't be reducing the actual bezel sizes that much or even at all. And also because 5.8 inches and 6.2 inches are around the limit when it comes to, large smartphones in a comfortable form factor. Now, when it comes to resolution, we were all expecting to see a 4K display with the S8, if you remember that. But that never ended happening. Then with the Note 8, we were also expecting to see a 4K display, but that never happened either. And by the way, the Snapdragon 835 and the Exynos 8895, so these are the chips that you get in the S8 and the Note 8, both of these processors support 4K resolutions up to 60 frames per second, but 60 Hertz. But Samsung decided not to include one in the S8 or the Note 8. Now, this was most likely because of the manufacturing cost of a 4K display, which is obviously not cheap, and also because of the impact this would have on the battery life. But a 4K display is honestly my #1 most awaited feature in the S9. Now, I know that most people won't need it, but I just love the Gear VR. It's by far the best mobile VR option available right now, and the 4K display would make it so much better. So even with a Quad HD Plus display like on the S8, it looks so pixelated, by the way. You can easily, just count the number of pixels that you see on the Gear VR's display, or, the S8's display. But with a 4K display, everything would be so sharp. Everything would basically be twice as sharp. Now, unfortunately, we haven't had any reports on a 4K display coming with the S9. But Samsung has always been very interested in VR. So if this didn't happen with the S8 or the Note 8, there's a slight chance that it might happen with the S9. But again, just don't get your hopes too high yet. Now, when it comes to the aspect ratio, it's still going to remain the same, so 18.5 by 9, just like on the S8 and the S8 Plus, and it's still going to be an AMOLED display. And what we might see as an improvement to this display is in terms of the display brightness. So when it comes to the display brightness, the S8 had a pitch brightness of 1000 nits, which is really, really impressive. But then the Note 8 actually had 1200 nits. So we're probably going to see 1200 nits or maybe even more on the S9. And yes, this is still going to be an HDR capable display. Hopefully Samsung will be adding Dolby Vision this time, but I don't see this happening because they don't have Dolby Vision on their TVs yet. So yeah, still HDR and HDR10. But yeah, this is pretty much everything we currently know at the moment in terms of the display on the S9. Now moving on to the camera, the biggest change is actually going to be a dual camera module. Now this is something that you are probably all expecting to see in the S9, so we didn't get this unfortunately with the S8. But Samsung did add this with on the Note 8, so yes, this is coming to the S9. Now, when it comes to the actual dual camera module, ET News, South Korea, reported that the camera would actually be able to capture 10x optical zoom instead of 2x that's the Note 8 or the iPhone 8 or the iPhone 7 Plus and so on come with. Now, this is actually a very interesting thing to see. So if you have a 10x optical zoom lens, obviously it's going to be way more telephoto than the 2x optical zoom one. So this means that you won't actually have that many common elements in a photo between the 10x optical zoom lens and the main lens. So what I'm saying is that portrait mode won't work anymore, at least not with a telephoto lens. However, Samsung does use something called a dual pixel sensor. So just like on the Google Pixel 2, for example, and the Pixel 2 XL, and Google actually uses the dual pixels for measuring depth at micron levels, which I believe that Samsung is going to do as well. So that way you can do both 10x optical zoom and you can still keep that depth effect. And that would be awesome. Now, apart from this, Samsung is also said to include 1000 frames per second slow motion, which would just smoke the 240 frames per second slow motion that we have on the iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and the iPhone 10. Now, I know this sounds crazy and science fiction, but it's not really. I mean, Sony already uses a 960 frames per second sensor in the Sony Xperia XZ Premium. So you can do 960 frames per second. So 1000 frames per second slow-mo definitely seems very, very likely to happen on the S9. But wait, Daniel, what about the actual camera specs? Well, 12 megapixel sensors on both modules, same as, the Note 8. However, this time do expect to see some pretty big camera improvements when it comes to processing. So, from the S8 to the S7, well, S7 to the S8, we didn't see that much improvements when it comes to the actual, camera specs. So we had the same aperture size. The module was a new module, but overall it was a really, really similar experience. So we are going to see improvements, especially when it comes to image processing. So similar to how Google has amazing processing on their Pixel and Pixel 2, so basically every shot that you take is essentially an HDR shot. So I do expect to see something similar with the S9. Now, 4K video at 60 frames per second is also a possibility. So we have this on the iPhone 8, and the Snapdragon 835 and the Exynos 8095, by the way, inside the S8 and the Note 8, they do support it. But for some reason, 4K 60 is not enabled. Now, this will most likely be enabled on the S9 to compete with the iPhone 8, the iPhone 8 Plus, and the iPhone 10. Now, moving on to the specs, same as with most of the previous Galaxy S phones, we're going to have two variants. So the first one is going to be the US model, which in the case of the S9, this is going to come with a Snapdragon 845. And then we're also going to have the international model, which is going to come with Samsung's own chip, which in this case is going to be the Exynos 9810. Now, long story short, both of these processors are very, very powerful mobile processors. Both are based on a 10nm process, just like the 2017 ones. We don't know that much about the Snapdragon 845 yet. But the Exynos 9810 is set to come with a neural engine, so similar to the one found in the Apple A11 processor. Now, Korea Herald, they reported that Samsung has invested a ton of money into a Chinese AI company called I think it's Defy Tech, I think that's how you pronounce it, Defy Tech, for developing their neural engine into their Exynos processors. Now, if this is indeed the case, and it does seem so, then Samsung would have to switch to the Exynos 9810 across the whole line of the S9 processors, which, they're still having a lot of production issues with their Exynos processors, so I'm not sure if this is actually going to happen, but it will have to happen if Samsung wants to keep the experience consistent. That's obviously unless Qualcomm finishes their own neural engine for the Snapdragon 845 in time. Okay, what else? Well, in terms of the RAM, 6 GB of RAM is what we're going to see. So same amount of RAM as on the Note 8, and that's pretty much it in terms of the specs. Okay, so what about any special features? Do we get any cool new features on the S9? Well, aside from everything that I've already mentioned before, there's a few new features that are rumored to come with the S9. So the first one is, yes, no headphone jack. So Samsung is expected to remove the headphone jack from the S9 entirely. And I know all of you complaining right now, yes, you would get an adapter inside the box so that you could use your own headphones, your own 3.5mm headphones. But honestly, the 3.5mm headphone jack is way, way past. So USB-C headphones and even, Bluetooth headphones especially are the future. And the thing is, if we want these kinds of headphones to improve, so Bluetooth headphones, then we should force all manufacturers to remove the headphone jack on all of the devices so that wireless tech can truly improve. And yes, we should also force Apple, by the way, to switch to USB-C, because, I mean, come on. I did a separate video just on that, why Apple isn't going to switch to USB-C anytime soon, by the way. But yeah, they should. Then at number 2, we have a front-facing fingerprint reader. So basically a fingerprint reader embedded into the display assembly. Now I know this was something that we were all expecting to see with the S8, but it never happened. Then we were all expecting to see this with the Note 8 because we had some prototypes that were leaked. They didn't have a fingerprint reader on the back, so maybe it was embedded into the front. But again, that never ended happening. And with the iPhone X, again, we were all expecting to see one embedded into the front of the display. But again, that never happened either. Instead, Apple removed Touch ID completely and replaced it with Face ID. Now, we've actually had a ton of reports, including leaked patents, by the way, showing a fingerprint reader embedded into the display assembly from Samsung. Now, this might happen, by the way, but I would say probably not, because of feature number 3, and that's a 3D face scanning tech. So 3D face scanning, Samsung is said to include a true depth camera on the front. So a true front-facing camera, true depth front-facing camera, similar to the one that Apple included with the iPhone X. And do you remember that neural engine that I was talking about embedded into the Exynos 9810? That would actually have a massive role in all this. So expect your S9 to unlock with just using your face, which, I mean, the S8 already does this because you have, an iris scanner, but you do have a separate facial recognition unlock as well. But that one can actually be tricked with a photo, by the way. So do expect to see a much more improved face unlock that won't be able to be tricked with a photo this time or video. And also expect to see Samsung's own version of Animojis. So Samojis? Samojis? Okay, next up, number 4. This is a really interesting one. So Sam Mobile reports that Samsung might be adding an environmental sensor to the S9, making your S9 capable of measuring air pollution. Now, this is, I know it sounds science fiction, but it's not. It's 100% possible. We even have this at the moment in smart home monitors. I even had one that was able to measure air pollution in my home. So, this tech already exists. And Samsung does have a ton of sensors on the S8 already. I mean, it does have a heart rate monitor on the back. You even have an oxygen level meter on the back. So adding an air pollution sensor is very, very likely to happen. And next up, there's also been a few reports saying that Samsung might be adding some modular accessories to the S9. So similar to how we've seen this on the Essential phone, for example. So magnetically attachable accessories. And these would be like an extra battery, a grip, an improved camera, the Gear 360 camera that can be added as an accessory to the S9, and so on. So pretty excited for this. Hopefully Samsung would make some really exciting and really useful accessories, unlike some other manufacturers. Okay, now moving on to storage options. Benjamin Gaskin seems like he had a source telling him that 128GB would be the baseline option. Now this would be great, of course, but it will also increase the cost, most likely. Now I would say that 64GB is most likely going to remain the baseline option, especially since you will still be able to add a microSD card if you wish and expand the storage even further. But also keep in mind that microSD card the storage speed is significantly slower, the I/O, than the internal storage speed. So that's something that you should always keep in mind. Okay, now when it comes to the battery, the S8 came with a 3500 mAh battery, which is actually smaller than the S7 Edge, which came with 3600 mAh battery, even though the S8, S8 Plus actually, was a much larger device than the S7 Edge. But this was because of, the famous incident that happened with the Note 7, so batteries catching fire and exploding. So this is why Samsung had to decrease the battery size on the S8 and the S8 Plus. Now, this is expected to change with the S9, with the battery size expected for the S9 Plus at least around 3600 to 3700 mAh. So nothing too crazy, but an improvement from the S8 Plus. But yeah, overall, the S8 Plus had a great battery life. I never had any major issues with the battery life, and the S9 is definitely going to be even better. Even if Samsung doesn't increase the battery size at all, it's still going to be better because, of the more efficient processors that, the Snapdragon 845 and the Exynos 9810 are going to be. Okay, now what about the release date? When is the S9 going to be announced and released? Well, when it comes to the release date, Samsung is expected to release the S9 earlier than usual. So most sources are pointing towards a February announcement alongside an early March release. So there we go, February announcement and somewhere around a March release. Now when it comes to the price, well, the S8 was pretty expensive. So the S8 started at $720 or 690 pounds, and the S8 Plus started at $840 and 780 pounds in the UK. So pretty expensive phones. And here's the thing, unfortunately, smartphones are getting way more expensive every single year. So Apple bumps up the price, then Google follows, then Samsung follows, then Apple increases the price even more, and the cycle continues. I mean, we're at a point where people are going crazy for the iPhone X, which is priced at $1,300 or $1,400, by the way, outside the US. So US is actually the cheapest place where you can get an iPhone X for any US residents complaining about the price inside the US. That's the cheapest you can get, by the way. So with the S9, the prices are going to go up even more. We just don't know by how much. Of course, this would depend on the storage options, but in the end, it wouldn't be as expensive as the iPhone X is. That's for sure. So do expect something around 850 to 780 pounds for the S9, not the S9 Plus, by the way. Okay, so in the end, the S9 looks like an S8s. So far it seems that the design is most likely going to remain the same with a few design changes. If we're going to see any design changes, the display will also remain mostly identical apart from the resolution, which I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we'll see a 4K display, even though that's quite unlikely. So performance improvements, this is something that we are going to see, quite a few new features and a dual camera module. But that's about it. So there we go, everything we currently know about the Samsung Galaxy S9 at the moment. Let me know in the comments what do you guys think about the S9 and the S9 Plus. And also, if you want to see more Leaks and Rumors episodes like this one, please subscribe and enable notifications so that you're notified whenever a new video comes out. So check out my Leaks and Rumors on the 2018 iPhones in case you're curious to see that. And you can also check out my previous Leaks and Rumors on the S8, for example, if you want to see those as well. But yeah, this was pretty much it for this video, so thank you for watching until the end. Let me know in the comments who was epic enough to make it until the end of this video. But yeah, I'm Daniel, and see you guys in my next one. Son of Tech, signing out. Cheers.